don't ever, and it's the cardinal rule of freediving, don't ever dive without a buddy, because if something happens, then it's 100%, you're not going to come back.
One minute I was swimming, and next minute I was waking up on the surface.
Biggest contributing factors to this incident was just, and it's one of the most common ways it occurs. It was the last dive or towards the end of the session, so you've been in the water for a long time, and two things happen. One, the confidence builds, like the dives start to feel easier towards the end of the session, so it feels easier to go deeper, to equalize, you feel more relaxed and everything. And the second thing is that your actual capacity goes down.
If I think I like you now, wait until next year. Not gonna calm down, I'm gonna face my fear.
Hello and welcome back to Thailand. If you're new here, I'm Rachel, and together with my husband Rob and our family, we've been sailing around the world for the last 5 years. We love this lifestyle. Travel exposes individuals to new cultures, environments and perspectives, fostering a mindset open to embracing challenges.
Day 6. Still going.
Studies have shown that 70% of travellers and only 52% of non-travellers are likely to accept new challenges. Imagine a life where everything is constant, where everything is safe and everything is easy, and most importantly, no one ever fails. How would we foster new experiences? Risk-taking is a catalyst for personal and professional growth, contributing significantly to the richness of life experience. However, the key element of taking risks is executing them judiciously and learning from the results. Last week, we almost lost our eldest son Finn in a free diving accident. We were out of our depth, literally and metaphorically. We know that we have to do better, and the best way to do that is learn from someone who knows the sport inside and out. Rob and Finn were lucky enough to sit down with fellow New Zealander, 7 times world champion, 18-time world record holder, the world's deepest man, having dived unaided on a single breath to a depth of 102 metres. That's 334 feet. He's the founder of Vertical Blue, the world's most prestigious free diving event, Mr. William Truebridge.
So, g'day Will. Welcome to this little interview. Thank you so much for agreeing to this chat. As you know, we've had a pretty traumatic, dramatic incident involving this young fella here. And and you may recall we were on to the emails to you straight away that day asking for any advice. And I was so thankful that you responded like that.
Yeah, whenever I get messages about like incidents like that, like I try and get back to those straight away, because yeah, the sooner the better while it's fresh, but also to prevent anything else from happening, of course.
Yeah, it was great, mate. Really, thank you so much. It gave us a lot of support that we kind of needed at the time. So before you go any further, I need to introduce you though, because William Truebridge is a New Zealander. In fact, his background stems from homeschooling. His parents were sailing around the world. Yay! And came from a similar background to what we and our kids have experienced. And they settled, his parents settled in New Zealand, and William since then went on to huge fame in our country and around the world, especially in the freediving world, where he is, correct me if I'm wrong, 7 times world champion and holds 18 world records in the sport and the discipline of freediving.
Yeah, more or less. Sounds right.
Amazing. So look, I've got a whole bunch of questions here for you, and I will begin by asking you, how did you get into freediving?
So I started, as you know, like when we were living on the boat, we were snorkeling and playing in the water all the time. So that was kind of the vestigial freediving, I guess. But we had like big fishbowl masks, stubby little plastic fins. So we didn't know anything about relaxation or the right kind of breathing. We were just kind of hammer and tongs trying to get as deep as we could. I didn't find it as a sport until I was 22 years old. And then I traveled to the Caribbean and kind of set up shop. I spent 3 months, I think, in Honduras and did nothing else other than free dive morning and afternoon. I was just going out with the scuba boats, and that's where I kind of like became passionate about it and decided it was something I wanted to pursue.
Did you get a sense that you might be reasonably good at the sport early on?
Not really. Like I felt like I had an affinity to the water, and I felt like I wasn't kind of afraid of going deep, and I could relax at depth, and equalization was important, and those are all really important things. But I didn't have like a natural ability in terms of breath holds or anything there. Like that had to come slowly with training. But I mean, I was like 100% dedicated to it, and I think that just meant that, yeah, whether or not I had any kind of natural talent, I was determined to get there in the end. So I specialize mostly in the depth disciplines, and in particular in the no fins discipline, which is where you don't have fins or anything to help you go down and up. It's just your hands and feet swimming, kind of like a breaststroke, an adapted breaststroke. And I understand that's what you were doing, Finn, when you had this mishap.
Yeah, no fins. Like I remember we used to do all kind of fins, and that's kind of similar to how you started freediving. It was just on the boat, and we started, playing in the water. I remember we would start by just wherever we would anchor in a bay, we'd dive down to the anchor, and that's how we knew how deep we were going. You start kind of like 3, 5, then get to 10, 12, and our first year on the boat, I think I got to 22, and I think, well, how old was I? 13,
12.
Yeah. And
nice.
Yeah, that was all with fins, and then it was only recently where we started kind of getting rid of them and going al natural. What do you call it? Where it's just you?
It's got a kind of a bulky name, constant weight no fins, or CNF for short. But I just refer to it as no fins freediving, or unassisted freediving as well.
Right. Yeah.
Which is that's the most pure form.
Yeah. I see it as the purest measure of human aquatic potential. Like if you ask someone like who's like, how fast are we? How fast is a human being? Then you look at someone like Usain Bolt, right? Because that's just the human body, pure speed. And in terms of depth, unassisted or no fins is just pure depth with no fins, no rope, no weights. I mean, you can wear weight, but whatever you take down, you've got to bring back up to the surface, which is why it's called constant weight.
I guess it's like climbing Mount Everest with no oxygen.
Similar to that, yeah. I guess there's different kind of gradations, I guess, but in freediving, the purest measure is definitely happens.
Would mountain climbing, free climbing, be the equivalent with no ropes, no safety ropes, no nothing?
Not sure, because if anything goes wrong when you're free climbing, you go splat. If something goes wrong when we're free diving, you have a buddy, then you should be fine. If you went free diving without a buddy, maybe that would be similar to free climbing, or probably more dangerous, because things like mishaps tend to occur maybe with more regularity. I'm not sure in free diving, but you definitely don't ever, and it's the cardinal rule of freediving, don't ever dive without a buddy, because if something happens, then it's 100% you're not going to come back. Whereas if you have a buddy there, it can be benign and you're laughing about it 30 seconds later.
Which we now know.
Indeed, we do.
Yeah.
Well, and just on that, we saw on your channel, because I've been following you for quite some time, I saw on your channel that you've just launched a freediving training course. And we intend to, all of us are going to do that course, Will, because we think it's hugely valuable. So good on you for putting that out. You should have done it 6 months earlier, though, mate.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to like upload everything that I know about freediving, like all the theory, but also all the training techniques and exercises and drills and programs, and anything that can help people understand freediving better or train better for the sport. So it's all going onto this one platform. It's videos, PDFs, all sorts. And so you can kind of work through it in your own time and digest the material and do the exercises.
Cool. Can I ask you, given what you know about what happened with the incident, I'll call it that, in this blackout, what would you suggest we could have and should have done to avoid that happening?
To avoid a blackout happening.
Yeah,
that's a good way to think, but you also always need to bear in mind that you will always have to provide for possible mishaps. Like even if you put everything in place to avoid it, it can still happen. So it's also the other half is to have all the drills, the safety drills, emergency protocols, and equipment, so that if something happens, you are like just completely oiled and ready for it. But in terms of prevention, the main thing, the first stop for prevention is Finn yourself, like knowing your own limits and being conservative in the way that you dive. I think probably one of the biggest contributing factors to this incident was just, and it's one of the most common ways it occurs, it was the last dive or towards the end of the session. So you've been in the water for a long time, and two things happen. One, the confidence builds, like the dives start to feel easier towards the end of the session. So it feels easier to go deeper, to equalize, you feel more relaxed and everything. And the second thing is that your actual capacity goes down. So you're more confident, but less capable the longer that you stay in the water. And there's many reasons for that, like dehydration, blood pressure going down, blood sugar going down critically. But also just the longer we're in the water, the more we tend to, when we're breathing between dives, we're eliminating more carbon dioxide than we are replacing during the actual dives. We become hypocapnic. Hypocapnic means low hypocapnic carbon dioxide. There's too little CO2 in the body. And you might think, well, that doesn't make sense. CO2 is a waste product. Of course, we need to get rid of it. But you do need a baseline level of CO2 in the body in order to, a few reasons, but the main one is to stimulate the dive reflex. And the dive reflex is this set of different physiological mechanisms in the body, the physiological reflexes that all together conserve oxygen. So it's this way for us to hold our breath longer under the water, to be safer. And all mammals have it. Obviously, the dolphins, the whales, they have it even stronger. They can kind of shut down their oxygen use in the rest of their body almost completely, so that oxygen is conserved for the heart and the brain. Wow. And yeah, we have that a little bit, and it's super important, but it's dependent on that CO2 level. So if you've off-gassed all your CO2 through being in the water a long time and like over-breathing between dives, etc., then you will consume more oxygen during your dive, and it'll feel easier because the CO2 also is what makes the dive, kind of gives you that urge to breathe. It gives you those warning signals that you need to tell you to come back up or to tell you to turn around. So you'll feel, this dive's going great. And then on the way back up to the surface, it's just lights out. You don't even remember kind of there's no like tunnel vision coming on or anything like that. It's just like 1 minute you're swimming up and the next minute you're waking up and your dad's pulling you onto the dinghy, I guess.
Yeah, and because I know you did a bit of rowing, hey, at school, didn't you?
Not at school, but at university afterwards.
University. Because it's you do. I mean, I know I've had it towards the end of a 2-kilometer test on an erg, and you get that the vision's narrowing and it's getting black, and you're on the verge of passing out. But it's and I guess you'd expect that if you're having a blackout underwater, you'd have a similar thing. But yeah, 1 minute I was swimming, and next minute I was waking up on the surface.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Finn
Um,
thought he had made it. He thought he had succeeded, didn't you?
Yeah,
that's
like in,
that's super common as well.
yeah,
Because
Yeah.
your mind just stitches together these two memories. The first memory is you swimming up, feeling fine. The second memory is you waking up on the surface. So therefore, between the two, you must have completed the dive. Like it's really interesting. And so it's like some people can be quite adamant that like, no, I don't black out, I'm fine. Until you
Well,
actually like show them the
it
footage.
took me quite a while. Like we'd been talking about it for at least 5 minutes, and I was in my head, I thought I'd just come to on the surface, and it took me a while to get convinced that I had blacked out. 5 or 6 meters from the top, because it was literally like in my head I thought I'd made it, and I was just like, I know, must have been tired and fallen asleep. It was just knackered, and yeah, and I got told that I hadn't made it. I was like, oh shoot.
So Finn just blacked out like 5 meters from the surface. Declan,
I swear I got to the top.
you didn't get to the top, no.
Yeah, so that's a good lesson to everyone, that you cannot like expect to get any kind of warning signals just before you black out, and base a breath hold or a dive on that. Especially the longer that you're in the water, the more that you off gas the CO2, the more that your blood pressure and blood sugar come down. Those are all those risk elements. So I think when you talk about prevention, the main one is just being aware of that factor. And if you are going to do like a deeper target, like a kind of going close to your limit, doing that earlier in the session, like in the first 3 dives max. So it's okay to do. Yeah, it would be okay to do 1 or 2 warm-ups. Like I don't, for maximal dives, I don't do any warm-ups at all. It's the first one, boom, go for it. But 1 or 2 is okay, but you don't want to be like diving for half an hour or an hour and then go for a maximal.
Whoa. So I guess just to give you a bit more background, the penultimate dive, Ivan had succeeded in getting down and up 30, maybe even 32 meters, no fins, got to the top, and he was a bit bloodshot. I remember seeing his eyes, they're quite bloodshot. We all watched him. And then he decided to stay up on the boat to the last dive, what turned out to be the last dive. And Declan was pretty keen to have a go, we thought. Declan went down a little bit too soon for Finn, who wanted to follow him down.
Yeah.
I feel quite comfortable.
Looking back on it, it was really silly, because I mean, I was even that whole human intuition, like I was getting some funny kind of thoughts going on before going down, like almost visualizing my demise, like thinking about like, oh, imagine if you did kind of not make it back up, and I was like, oh, that'll never happen. Yeah, and then obviously I'd just done quite a deep dive, for me on that last one.
27, 28 meters?
Yeah, 26, 27. Yeah. And so I wasn't feeling quite ready to go, but Declan was ready, and I was kind of pretty keen to go together. And so I mean, it's kind of So
let me just get this straight. You both dived together to go for like a deep dive that you'd never done before.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
Now, just a bit of background, a bit more background. They'd been diving, they'd been mucking around for about an hour and a half. We had a rope in the water, it was about 23 meters, and we had some dive weights at the bottom of it. So I'd go and sit at the dive weights and sort of muck around and back up. And on that dive, Declan went down, Finn followed him, and then I followed Finn. And Ivan was at the surface, just he had done his thing, he'd succeeded. And I got down to the weights where they were 22, 23. And then I watched Declan hit the ground, jump back and push off. And then I saw Finn carry on, which was surprising to me. And I saw him hit the bottom and then about to push off. And I thought, okay, he's pushing off, I'm going to head up. So I went up ahead of him, similar to Declan, and we both got to the surface pretty close. Now, Declan got to the surface, and he had what he just realised later was a slight, not blackout, but he sort of fainted because Ivan held him, and he doesn't remember Ivan holding him. He was
right. That was a mini blackout as well. Yeah,
he was close to
Batson.
Yeah. And so I watched Declan kind of do this whole gasping thing, and he was and then I saw Ivan had it under control. So I then looked down for Finn, and he was out at that point. And then, and what followed, So we were buddy diving, but kind of in a slightly disorganized way.
Yeah, you were buddy diving, but you didn't have a ratio of at least you had more divers than you had buddies, basically, and that should be the other way around. 2 buddies, 1 diver, that's fine. Two divers and 1 buddy is asking for it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, what would have happened if both of them had backed out at 5 or 6 meters, and now you're going down and you've got to choose which of your sons to bring back to the
Sophie's
surface.
choice, yeah.
You don't need to answer that one. So yeah, the safety the safety measures and rules are really important in this. And yeah, you had the buddy system, but you were just disorganized in terms of like who was doing what and who was supposed to be safetying whom. And lucky it all came right, but could have been worse. I mean, if someone is going for a dive that they haven't done before, like a PB, then ideally you want to have 2 safety divers. One of them goes down and meets, and the other one just stays on the surface. And that, so if the first safety diver suddenly like has a problem with their ears and they can't go down, the second diver takes over. But also if the first safety diver has just brought the diver to the surface from depth, and so they're completely wiped out and they can't do like rescue breaths or all the protocol, then the person on the surface takes over. So yeah, whenever you're going for something a little bit more demanding, then make sure there's at least 2 people per diver.
That's such good makes sense, Cole. That's perfectly common sense stuff, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Once you start pushing it past 30 meters, if you're going for pure depth, then you want to start thinking about like using a proper setup with a line, with a weight on the bottom, that you can pull to the surface quickly, and having a lanyard with a running carabiner so you're clipped onto that line, just in case something happens while you're at depth, out of reach of the safety diver. Then the people on the surface can just pull up the whole thing, and you're attached to it. The plate or the bottom weight catches your lanyard and pulls you to the surface. So that's the system that we use in training for our deepest dives, and it's pretty much almost never actually needed to be employed, just on very, very rare occasions. But yeah, on those rare occasions, it's 100% a lifesaver.
Yeah. On that, I actually I listened to a podcast you did. I'm not sure when you did it, but you talked about an incident you had where you passed out quite deep, and that system was what saved your life. Yeah. Do you reckon you can talk about that?
Yeah, so that was the deepest blackout that I've had, and in this discipline, I don't think I've even had a blackout below the surface before. I'd had blackouts maybe on the surface after coming to the surface and taking a breath and then blacking out, but pretty much nothing underneath the surface. And on this day, I blacked out 42 meters below the surface, and we still don't have confirmation, but it seems very clear that it wasn't a hypoxic blackout. It wasn't a low oxygen blackout, which is what most of these shallow water blackouts are. It was something different, and the biggest reason for that is because a few days before, I was doing dives to deeper than the world record. This is a long period of training, and I was going free immersion where you pull yourself down the rope, and I'd done 120.
So you were doing dives deeper than the world record?
Yeah, in the discipline of free immersion. So in this discipline, you can use the rope to pull yourself down and pull yourself back up. Okay, and I've been training for a long period, and just really, really conservatively increasing depth by no more than 1 meter at a time, and doing that depth a few times before I increased by another meter. So the whole season like this, and just having like great dives. And then I'd done 126 meters a few days before, and it was probably one of the best free immersion dives of my career. Just felt dreamy, easy, like beautiful, smooth. Came to the surface, there was more in the tank, and so okay, I thought put another meter on the next dive, 127. And worst case scenario, like maybe I would have had like something on the surface, but there's no explanation for having a blackout, at least no explanation due to low oxygen for a blackout of 42, 43 meters. We suspect that it was due to extreme CO2 narcosis, but even that is still question marks. In any case, blacked out at 42, 43, and then that depth was deeper than my safety diver was coming to meet me. He was coming to 30 meters. And when he got to 30, he couldn't look down, could not see me because I'd already drifted down to, at that point, to 50 something. And so he went back to the surface as quick as he could, activated the counterballast and started pulling it to make it quicker. But by the time that plate came up from 127, I had drifted down to, so it met me at 76 meters. So I'd fallen down like another, so I went to 127, came up, pulling up to 42, blacked out, drifted down to 76, and then was pulled to the surface. And they resuscitated me fairly quick. Like apparently I came to within about a minute, which for that kind of depth and the time that I was underwater is surprising, and also indicates that it wasn't like low oxygen, because yeah, the resuscitation was fairly kind of straightforward. But I had other complications with DCS because I'd been under the depth for so long and then brought to the surface quickly that I had like bubbles everywhere, and I could feel myself like heading towards being completely paralyzed. So I was able to just get back into the water with a bottle of oxygen and get down to like 10-15 meters, which is enough to compress those bubbles back, and and then you reabsorb the nitrogen and off gas it, which is what you do in a chamber. Like, but this way, the sooner you can do it, the less long-term damage you have. If I'd waited to get air evacuated by a plane from the island to a chamber, it would have taken kind of 12-20 hours minimum, and in that time I would have probably got permanent damage. Normally you don't experience that in freediving at all, and you definitely wouldn't freediving to kind of 30-40 meters. It's only going to like 100 plus meters and being down there for a long time or doing multiple dives that you risk it. But the oxygen not only can be used for that function, but more importantly, it can be used for blackouts to get a faster resuscitation. So if you have a small, even just like a pony tank of pure oxygen that you carry around on the dinghy with you when you go diving, then the person who's doing those recovery breaths, if they take a hit of that first and then breathe that air into the person who's blacked out, that's 100% pure oxygen that's getting into their lungs, and so it resuscitates them a lot quicker because you're getting delivered 5 times the amount of oxygen. So if there is a problem with gas exchange because of water or blood obstructing the airways, then the oxygen kind of overrides that.
And that's what's unexperienced, eh?
Yeah, and once I had the oxygen mask, it started to kind of like ease up. I was able to breathe easier, and yeah.
So your oxygen saturation, your arterial oxygen saturation would have been low. Like your lungs just weren't able to absorb as much oxygen as they needed to from the air, because like the barrier between the air we breathe in and the blood, there's like a wall, cell walls there that are really, really thin, so the air can just diffuse across that boundary. But as soon as you put like water in there or blood on that wall, then the air no longer diffuses, and so we lose that whole capacity for respiration.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, just one thing we've learned since then, and I don't know if this is true or not. We've been told, I don't know, was it Declan read somewhere, I think one of the boys anyway, said that we should have taken Finn's goggles off as soon as we got to the surface. Is that right? Because of some sort of response, some sort of...
Yes. Yeah, as soon as the protocol, once you bring someone to the surface, the first thing is to try and get them planing off on the surface onto their back. Because quite often, if you bring them straight up, what's going to happen, they're going to bob up and then just like face plant into the water. And if they just came to that moment that they bobbed up, then they're going to breathe in water or get it into the airways. So like planing them off onto their back, supporting their back. And there's a specific way to do that with one hand under the small of the back, and then with the other hand reaching over and removing anything that they have on their face, whether it's nose clip goggles, mask, whatever they have, taking that off. And then the protocol is tap, talk, blow. Tap, talk, blow. So tapping them on the side of the face, talking to them, typically saying their name, because even though they're unconscious, you do still have some kind of subconscious awareness. And then blowing across the face stimulates nerves that detect the fact that you're above the surface again and spontaneously wake you up. And that's another reason why taking goggles is important, so that you can really stimulate those receptors. And typically, in most cases, the person will come around within a few seconds of starting that protocol. If that doesn't work, then you start what we call rescue breaths, where you are basically in the water, pinching their nose and blowing into their mouth in order to try and force air into their lungs. Or sometimes it sounds like Finn had his mouth open, but in some cases there's a reflex to clamp the mouth shut that can be really powerful and difficult to override. So you might not be able to like get any air into their mouth because they're just like holding their mouth closed. And also the glottis as well. So in that case, you can also do mouth to nose resuscitation. So breathe into the nose, like get a good seal around the nose and just like push as much air there as you can. And often that will like then come out the mouth and there'll be like water and other stuff, but it's all part of like trying to get those airways open again. So that's what you would do if the initial tap, talk, blow doesn't work after about like 15 seconds of doing that.
So I guess that's probably the one thing we didn't do right, because it actually took me quite a while to come to on the surface. Like close to a minute. And I probably because the mask wasn't taken off.
Right.
And I think Declan actually kind of just went straight for he couldn't help himself, went straight for the kiss of life. Giving air. So
and was he getting air into you at that point, or?
So I think he reckoned he gave like 6 or 7 breaths, kind of like as soon as I kind of got on the surface. So kind of cut to the chase there. So I guess in future it'd be mask, what you said, the tap, talk, and blood, and then the breaths, obviously, because that's what I was actually thinking, like shoot, because I know when you do the breaths, you're kind of, from what I've heard, is it 2 breaths and then you kind of take a break and then another 2 and kind of until someone does come to?
If you're doing like CPR, I think at the ratio that they teach now is like 2 and 30. So
not much.
2 breaths and then 30 chest compressions. But for the rescue breaths, for in-water rescue breaths, in this case, in a blackout, then you keep on doing them, really.
Right.
While they're in the water, just keep on doing them. And then you do a few and then like start to get them out of the water onto the boat, so that it's easier to kind of move to the next phase if they do not come around. But if it's someone who's kind of who's drowned, who's like been under the water for a while, and you've been like looking for them, and then you find them and bring them to the surface, so they've been under the water for minutes, then the resuscitation is going to take longer. But in these cases where it's like a buddy who's just brought you to the surface and you've been under the water for an extra kind of 20-30 seconds, then resuscitation is almost always going to be fairly immediate, especially if you get this protocol tap, talk, blow.
We were elated when Finn came around. We had this moment at the bottom of the boat, still in the water, just retelling our own version of the story of what had just occurred. And then we eventually got out of the boat, and then Finn started half an hour later developing some restricted breathing. And then we realized actually, the possibility, and I'm not sure many people may know about secondary drowning. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, there's 2 risks. The secondary drowning is probably the bigger one. If you have fluid in your lungs, then that can obstruct the gas exchange. And someone can actually kind of regress and get worse and potentially even die after they've been kind of resuscitated and come around. So you do want to be careful if there is suspected water in the lungs, then the rescue doesn't kind of end the moment they regain consciousness. But it could also be, the other risk is that it's also a lung squeeze, which is where the negative pressure in the lungs has created kind of lesions of the tissue in the airways or in the alveoli, which has led to blood passing into the airspace, and that also obstructs the gas exchange. So those are definitely two risks, and it's hard to say which of those was the one that applied in Finn's case. You said that when you came down to grab him, his mouth was already open, which is not common in freediving blackouts. So it's possible that he could have like got a little bit of water in his lungs by that point. And just to pick up on a few things, you said that you didn't know how long he had been kind of blacked out, and so that informs me that you weren't watching him in that critical last phase of the ascent. So if someone is going for a deeper dive, especially if it's a depth they haven't done before, then you have to have that buddy system in place, and you should be not just watching them, but coming down to meet them on the way up. So if you're probably diving in good vis water, you could probably see him all the way to the bottom and back. And so when you see him start to come up, you time your dive so that you meet him at, say, 10, 15 meters. And then if you see anything happening, you can grab him, and it'll be a lot easier to bring him to the surface because he'll probably be positively buoyant. The reason why he felt so heavy was because he must have come up, and maybe he even actually got to the surface. He says that he felt like he made it, and maybe he did, and blacked out just underneath the surface, like at 1 or 2 meters, and in blacking out exhaled all his air, which is common, and became negatively buoyant, and then started to drift back down and drifted back down to 6 or 7 meters. And now he's even more negatively buoyant, so that when you grab him, he feels like a sack of potatoes because he doesn't have any air in his lungs. Yeah. And this could also have contributed to that what was in his lungs, because going back down when you're unconscious is one of the biggest risks for lung squeeze as well, because now you're having contractions, you're not equalizing properly, etc. So yeah, all those things together, basically probably the big, there's two mistakes. One was like going for this dive later in the session after an hour and a half, 2 hours. The second one was that you didn't have the safety systems in place. You weren't using the buddy system as it's supposed to be used. So making sure that, okay, I'm doing a dive to 30 meters. Who's going to be my safety? Okay, cool. You'll meet me at 10, 15 meters. I think my dive time is going to be this. And so from that moment, the safety diver is just focused exclusively on that diver, comes down to meet him. And if anything looks funny, typically if you see like bubbles start to come out, that's the first warning sign. But watch the eyes more than anything else, because you'll be able to tell from kind of the eye contact and how they're looking, if they're kind of going pear-shaped. Yeah. Just to reiterate, it's so important to have all of these drills, these techniques, safety protocols all on board, and to have them primed and kind of like rehearsed, and so everyone knows exactly what they need to do in these scenarios. Because maybe next time, if there is a next time, maybe it's you, and so one of your sons will need to jump in. So everyone needs to have that same kind of training and capacity.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Will.
No worries.
Yeah, it was amazing talking to you. Gosh, we feel very privileged, and I've followed you for a long time. And
it's quite cool to virtually meet you. Since we started like doing obviously recreational, just diving off the boat, like you've always been someone who I've been following and watching what's happening. And so it's very cool to talk.
Nice. Well, thank you. Good to have that feedback. Cheers, guys, and yeah, stay
thank you.
safe. But don't give it up. Freediving can be very safe as long as you're following all the measures and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Nice.
All right. Cheer, bro.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.
That was very cool.
Yeah, it was, eh?
Yeah, because I mean that is like, I mean I said it before. It's like I remember when it's crazy how that's kind of quite similar to how we started. Like
Yeah.
we were just playing around. Like that's literally what we would do. I
Yeah.
remember when I don't know when we first started kind of getting to a decent depth, but I remember like whenever we'd go to a new anchorage, wherever we'd drop the anchor,
Yeah.
the first thing we'd do would go in and we'd dive to the anchor.
Yeah.
And we did that wherever we went. And yeah, and it's kind of just progressed from there into something we actually, I know, free diving.
Yeah, it was great, eh?